I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we're going to be talking about the most recent BAFTA awards, what they mean for the Oscars, and how we still don't really know what's going on. But this is why I make these videos. We're now on season 9 of our Old Oscar Countdown series. So we have a lot of history, a lot of videos that you can go back on and see how accurate we've been. Usually pretty great in terms of the winners of the Oscars every year. And that's why I wanted to make this video, to ultimately help you break down what I would categorize as the craziest Oscar year we've had in a long while. Definitely of this decade, and maybe since I've been covering this series. I mean, it reminds me a lot of like 2015 or like the kind of 2014 race even, you could say. I'll talk about that a bit later. 2019 was also a competitive year, but that was more of a surprise on the Oscar night. I think there's really a lot of surprises with these precursors, which is going to make the Oscars super exciting, and I'm going to break that down here on this video. And as always, I'd really appreciate if you guys comment below and let me know your thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts on were for the BAFTA. If you have any hot takes or anything like that, I'd love to hear that in the comments down below. But essentially, I'm going to start off with some more general thoughts about the show, what this means for the race. And then what I want to do is just go category by category. What happened at the BAFTAs? How does this relate to the Oscars? Broken up into 3 separate sections. Categories that are pretty much locks for the Oscars after the BAFTA wins, categories that are pretty much locks after the BAFTA wins for the Oscars, and then categories that are up in the air, that have a really competitive race that we don't know what's going to happen, and kind of just go through quickly category by category and what BAFTA was able to either confirm or, create some suspicions within our minds for in terms of what's going to happen at the Oscars. So just some general thoughts starting off with things. I think, once again, it's just, I mentioned up top, a really unpredictable Oscar race, in particular for Best Picture. That's the one that I think everyone's most interested in every year. And with Conclave winning Best Film here, it shakes things up even more so. I was happy to say that, my two kind of dark horse predictions in terms of my Best Picture predictions when the Oscar nominations came out was Anora and Conclave, and ever since then they've just kind of continued to roll forward. And I said so because the most traditional path to winning Best Picture includes a Best Screenplay prize, and Anora and Conclave were the two frontrunners in their respective categories, and ever since then have done very well in the guilds. And what this is really telling us is that the early award shows that we get aren't totally super relevant. I mean, the Golden Globes went with Emilia Perez and The Brutalist, and neither of those films ended up winning at actual Guild award shows, and that's why I want to make the difference and the distinction. So you may watch the Golden Globes and go, yeah, but this person won there. But what we ultimately like to look at for the Oscars when predicting the Oscars here at Old Oscar Countdown is the industry awards. That is BAFTA, that is SAG, PGA, DGA. That's because we know there are members of SAG who are also Oscar voters. So you get a real live kind of indication of Oscar voters, who they're voting for, versus someone like the Golden Globes, which is a group of 300 people, none of which overlap with the Oscars. So that's why we try to keep more of an attentive eye later on the season to these industry awards rather than the earlier parts of the year with Golden Globes and Critics' Choice. Yes, they can overlap, and many of the categories did, but it's also important at this time of year to keep your mind kind of open and willing to go different ways. So BAFTA, in terms of the overall award show, I think was an okay night for Anora. Not great, but not disastrous. Conclave had a very strong night, but maybe kind of secretly cursed by winning Best Film. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And The Brutalist, I thought, was solid, but not spectacular. I definitely think needed to win Best Film to be in the conversation to win at the Oscars. So that kind of losing that category, I think, definitely hurts it, but still won in director, still won in actor, cinematography. So it still is a major, well-liked contender. So coming out of the Oscar race, definitely Conclave cemented itself as a major contender. And I think Anora had maybe a slight decrease in terms of its chances of winning Best Picture, but I think kind of made pretty standard. And then The Brutalist, I think, had maybe a bit of a slight hit, even though it won in director, just because it didn't win for Best Film. And when we're talking about what's going to win the big prize, Best Picture, Brutalist definitely needed, I think, to win Best Film here at the BAFTAs. But let's go through it. So the 3 different kind of groupings: categories that are locks, categories that are pretty much locks, and then categories that are up in the air, and just go, one by one to understand what are the categories we need to worry about and what are the categories we don't. So categories that are locks: adapted screenplay is going to go to Conclave. wasn't nominated at WGA, but won here at BAFTA. The movie won Best Film. It's clearly well liked, so I'd be very surprised if that doesn't win. Also won the Golden Globes, for example, for Best Screenplay, even though, that it was the only adapted nominee. Best Costume Design, Wicked won at both the Costume Designers Guild and now here at BAFTA. It's winning there. Wicked is also going to win Best Production Design at the Oscars. Interesting to see that The Brutalist was its only competitor in production design and actually lost in the period category at the Art Directors Guild. So I don't see Wicked or having really any competitors. And then, of course, Wicked also won at the Art Directors Guild and then won here at BAFTAs. And then Makeup, The Substance, won at 2 major Makeup and Hairstyling Guild award categories and then won here. And we always see the makeup category go in connection to either an acting win or an acting nomination. And you have the connection here between Demi Moore getting nominated and then Makeup here as well for a transformative prosthetics version kind of a makeup. It's a classical winner. It's won here at BAFTA. It's won at Makeup and Hairstyling Guild. So it's very likely to win. Those are categories that I think don't overthink them. They're locks, put them in for the Oscars. And then categories that are pretty much locks, that is to say, there could be a surprise, but I don't know if I'm going to make a change in my predictions at this time. So you have the 2 supporting acting categories, actor and actress. Kieran Culkin didn't have a chance to give a speech, but it seems like this hasn't really been affecting him too much. This was his hardest chance, I think, at a win. I think it's very likely for him to win for SAG, and clearly the movie has some international support given its original screenplay win here. And then supporting actress, I think Zoe Saldana. It was interesting to see that, the Carla Sofia Gascon kind of controversy that really hurt Emilia Perez, I think, in the public eye. That story came out kind of in the middle to near the end of BAFTA voting of their window. So it's therefore, I think, notable that Zoe Saldana was still able to win despite the controversy happening during that BAFTA voting window. There was questions about whether or not no one's going to even touch Emilia Perez and no one's going to win from that movie. But I thought Zoe winning here is still a sign of support that they're willing to reward the movie in certain categories, even if not, the movie overall. And I thought she gave a terrific speech and kind of reminded people why they like her and how kind of personable she was. She was probably one of the best speeches, I thought, of the night. And that's always notable, just to cement yourself as that front runner. And then we know that SAG loves Netflix movies. So I'd be very surprised if she doesn't win at SAG. So then you'd have BAFTA and SAG, and you're kind of a lock for the Oscars. Cinematography. BAFTA went with The Brutalist. I think that's probably going to repeat at the Oscars. Now, we don't have the American Society of Cinematographers, the main kind of cinematography branch. We don't have their winners yet, so there could be a surprise there. That being said, Lowell Crawley, who's the cinematographer for The Brutalist, also won at the British Society of Cinematographers Guild Awards, beating out Jaron Blaschke for Nosferatu, who I think is his main competitor. Also beat out Jaron Blaschke here at BAFTA, so you have a BAFTA win, a BSC win. Even if it doesn't win ASC, I think it's still got a strong positioning to win at the Oscars. And then you think of just even the 70 millimeter of it all, and so much of it has to do with the theatrical experience. And that's helped past cinematography winners just recently last year with for Oppenheimer. Then score should go to The Brutalist. The Brutalist did win at the Society of Song Composers and Lyricists in the independent category, but in the studio category, it went to The Wild Robot. So I don't know if there's a strong number 2. If it were to be a strong number 2, it would be Conclave. But Conclave also was really well liked at BAFTA and still lost the score category here. So I actually think the score win at BAFTA here was a big sign of support. So I guess technically it could be Conclave, but right now I'd be very surprised if it wasn't The Brutalist. VFX, Dune Part 2 won here, and interestingly it lost the main VFX category at the VES Awards, the Visual Effects Society, so that's the kind of Visual Effects Guild. That being said, the Visual Effects Society loves Weta and their work with the Planet of the Apes movies. So Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and I believe War for the Planet of the Apes also won at the VES Awards in that main category and then went on to lose at the Oscars. Even most recently last year, The Creator won that main VES category and then lost to Godzilla at the Oscars. So they're not really a very predictive group. So I think the fact that Dune 2 is a more well-liked movie than The Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and won here at BAFTA is a stronger indication than the VES main prize. So say Dune 2 is still pretty much probably a lock here for VFX. International feature, I guess technically, I'm Still Here could surprise and win, but Emilia Perez once again winning here in the foreign language category, I think shows a strong sign of support that it's just the most well-liked movie. Yes, I'm Still Here is nominated for Best Picture as well as Emilia Perez, but Emilia Perez was nominated in all the same categories as I'm Still Here and 10 more. Things have changed since the nominations, so it wouldn't be a complete surprise if I'm Still Here were to win, but right now, Critics' Choice Awards, Golden Globes, BAFTA, everything's kind of in line right now to reward Emilia Perez. And then Best Actor, I think, is a pretty much kind of a lock or close to a lock. Yes, Timothée Chalamet could win at SAG, but A Complete Unknown seems to have lost a little bit of steam. It hasn't won a single major category in any of these kind of major award shows. I think that's notable. I think Chalamet could still win at SAG, but I'm not sure if he's going to win at the Oscars. And Adrien Brody, I think, has an equal chance of winning at SAG, as does Chalamet, just because he has all this momentum of winning in every single place. I think it's notable when we think about the acting categories, when we have kind of, splits, let's say, like Chadwick Boseman winning for SAG and then Anthony Hopkins winning for BAFTA, or Austin Butler versus Brendan Fraser. Like, some years we have some splits between like who's going to win. Sometimes I think it's notable the fact that usually the other contender wins somewhere. Paul Giamatti wins at Critics' Choice Awards. Austin Butler wins at BAFTA. Right now, Chalamet just hasn't won anywhere, so there's no strong reason, I think, to think that he would win. He really does need SAG for us to even consider him to be a contender. And then when it comes down to it, even if Chalamet does win SAG, this acting category almost always rewards the older actor, not the kind of younger actor. They'll go with Fraser over Austin Butler. They'll go with Chadwick Boseman or Anthony Hopkins over Chadwick Boseman. They're not really keen to reward, Leonardo DiCaprio didn't get nominated or didn't win until his 40s. So they're not really keen to reward the younger actors, as versus in the actress category, they are a little bit more keen to do that. So that's kind of an old Oscars rule. And when you have a tight race like this, everything is just kind of pointing towards, I think, Adrien Brody's direction at this point. Then these categories are what I would consider the close categories, the too tough to call categories. Starting off, I guess, with the original screenplay category. This is tough because I don't think anyone was predicting a real pain to win here. Anora, if it's going to win Best Picture, will likely win for Best Original Screenplay. That being said, it is a little bit odd that it loses out at Critics' Choice Awards for screenplay. It loses out here for screenplay. It's not, I think, an obvious in-your-face kind of a screenplay prize winner. It's more, if it were to win, a spotlight or a green book type of a win where people just love the movie so much that they also reward the screenplay. Parasite may be another example. And I think if The Substance were to win here, I would have seriously considered The Substance for original screenplay at the Oscars. But I don't see the clear number 2 to beat out Anora, so Anora still is probably the front runner, although I think there's two kind of situations. Either Anora wins Best Picture in Screenplay, or it doesn't win Screenplay and something else is winning Best Picture. I'd be very surprised if it lost in the Screenplay category and then won Director and Picture. Just seems very kind of like an odd path for that movie. I think you kind of have to predict Screenplay and Picture for Anora if you're doing that, or neither for that movie. Then the editing category is still too tough to call, I think. First of all, the Ace Eddie Awards, the Editing Guild, isn't until after the Oscars, so they won't be of help. So we really have to kind of rely on, I guess you could say Critics' Choice, but really only the BAFTAs as our main precursor. So the fact that the Conclave went here, I think, is somewhat notable, but you also have to keep in mind this group really loved Conclave. So if they really loved Anora and they gave Anora Best Film, would they have also given it Best Editing? I think that's a possibility. I don't think Conclave has super obvious, in-your-face, noticeable editing that's, of course, it's going to win at the Oscars. It didn't win at Critics' Choice Awards, for example, so it's not like this obvious frontrunner of a winner. And then even just personally, based on my own analysis, I think it's not in-your-face in the way past editing winners have been. And then the BAFTAs also go with weird editing winners frequently. No Time to Die, or Vice, or Baby Driver, all Best Editing winners at BAFTA that didn't win at the Oscars. So there's no guarantee that Conclave were to win here. I think it's absolutely the front runner, but I wouldn't be surprised if it lost at the Oscars. And the narrative ends up being, well, they gave Conclave Best Film, so they gave it Best Editing and Screenplay because it had to win something. And then the Oscars gave Anora Best Picture, so they also gave it that movie editing. That could be a real scenario here. Really exciting category on the Oscars. Really interested to see what happens, because it could be one of those wins where if Anora wins early on in the night, you can say, okay, it's winning Best Picture. But if Conclave wins, well, then we could be up here for an upset. The sound category I also think is still kind of up in the air. After Dune 2's win here, it should be the front runner. I think it still is the front runner. That being said, there is a bit of a connection year over year between the best sound winner and the best editing category. Oftentimes, if you win best sound, you also win best editing, or at the very least, if you win best sound, you have to be nominated for best editing. I think it's notable that Dune Part 2 was not nominated for editing, and a movie like Wicked was. So a strong sign of support here that Dune 2 ultimately got the win here for sound, but definitely not a guarantee. And I'm going to be carefully looking at both the CAS and MPSE awards, the two kind of major sound editing guilds that we have, and see where they go. Because if I see any kind of support for a movie like Wicked, say Wicked wins CAS or an important category in MPSE, then I'm going to be all over. I think maybe Wicked winning for sound at the Oscars. The animated feature category is also a category that could be up in the air. I think Wallace and Gromit winning here makes kind of sense, because it's a very British film and the BAFTAs have awarded Wallace and Gromit in the past. So I think it's a bit of a red herring I don't think Wallace and Gromit's going to win at the Oscars, but what it does mean is that we don't have more clarification as to what potential Academy members like between The Wild Robot and Flow. I still think those are the two frontrunners to win for Best Anime Feature. Although I will say, in a way, Flow losing out here is a bigger loss than The Wild Robot losing out here, just because BAFTA, the animated feature category, will go with the more weirder pick, the independent movie, more so than the mainstream movie. So it not having the full level of support to win at BAFTAs indicates to me that there's maybe just not enough international support for the movie. And I think right now, if I were to pick anything, it would be The Wild Robot, just because, in a way, Flow not winning here is a bigger loss than The Wild Robot not winning here. And then plus, The Wild Robot has all the kind of Annie Award support, and you would imagine the kind of American branch of the Academy would like it a little bit more, versus Flow. I think Flow really needs to have a singular, definitive win here at BAFTA to make it a serious contender at the Oscars, but it still won at the Golden Globe, so it's absolutely a contender. The Best Documentary category is also one of my most anticipated on Oscars night. It's interesting that No Other Land didn't win here, but that doesn't really stop me, because you have to go back to 2016, I believe, in which the Best Documentary Oscar winner wasn't nominated at BAFTA. Most of the time they are. So I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, No Other Land losing here means Sugarcane's going to win. It just means things are unpredictable, because Superman won here, and then also won at the BAFTAs, and then also won at the PGA Awards, and then the Porcelain War won at DGA. So because Super/Man is not nominated at the Oscars, I guess Porcelain War is maybe the front runner. But then that was nominated at BAFTA, so that would be the first time since 2016 that a movie that wins Best Documentary at the Oscars was not nominated at BAFTA. Maybe it's Sugarcane, maybe it ends up being No Other Land, but then that's also a movie that doesn't have any distribution, so I don't know how well seen the movie is, but it's political, which they like, so it's kind of a confluence of events. I really don't know what's going to happen with the Best Documentary category, and I kind of wanted a movie like No Other Land to win, just to say, okay, it's the front runner, we can kind of not worry about that category, but it's really going to be unpredictable on Oscar night. Then the Best Director category is almost a 50-50 toss-up at this moment. I mentioned earlier that I think this category in particular reminds me, and this year in many ways reminds me of 2014, where that was the year where Birdman won for Best Picture, and Alejandro Iñárritu won for Director and also won for Screenplay. And there was a question of whether or not, okay, maybe Birdman wins for Screenplay, and then Director goes to Linklater, and then maybe Screenplay goes to Wes Anderson for Grand Budapest Hotel, and they spread the love. And that didn't happen. They liked Birdman, so they gave it Best Picture, and because they gave it Best Picture, they gave it Director, and they gave it Screenplay. And we see this from time to time, thinking that we almost want things to be even out, because it's a little bit more generous that way. Everyone gets an Oscar, but for the most time, the Oscars, just look at the past 2 years, they reward the movie that they like with a lot of Oscars. Oppenheimer won 7, Everything Everywhere All at Once won 7. If you're a major contender, even in years where it's unpredictable, like the Parasite year, it won picture, it won screenplay, it won director, it wins the big categories. There is no kind of spreading of the love. So I think the scenarios in my mind is there's a scenario I think where Nora wins for picture and screenplay and that's it. But in a way, I think if you're predicting Brady Corbet to win for Best Director off of a BAFTA win and a Golden Globe win, then you're going to say, well, I think maybe The Brutalist is winning picture or Conclave is winning picture, and I don't think it's going to be a night for Nora. Technically, there is a scenario where Corbett wins for director, Nora wins for screenplay, and Nora wins for picture. But I think just based on past recent history, it seems like the Oscars like to reward the movie they like the best. So if that movie is Nora, then they're also going to go with director for Baker. And I mentioned 2014 because that's what happened with Inarritu in 2014, where he won the DGA prize and then didn't win at BAFTA, didn't win the Golden Globes, but then ultimately still won at the Oscars. Baker winning at DGA is, I think, the strongest sign of support. It doesn't mean he's guaranteed, but I think probably you could say it's 60-40 between Baker and Corbett, depending on how you see the Best Picture race going forward. I think will align with how you see the director race. Corbett being more of a traditional winner, having multiple nominations of below the line, and Baker being an untraditional pick, being more like an Inarritu with Birdman, which didn't have any below the line nominations. I'm not including editing, versus someone like Parasite. Even Parasite had a production design nomination. And most of the time, whether it be Nolan or the Daniels for Everything Everywhere All at Once, they usually have a lot of acting nominations and a lot of below-the-line nominations. So if Baker wins, he would kind of be bucking that trend. And then Best Actress, another category that really spiced things up. I thought I was going to go to Demi Moore and then she would win at SAG and it would just be over and Demi Moore is going to be our winner. But of course, it can never be that simple. I think Mikey Madison winning here is a big win for her chances at the Oscars. Just the fact that she is in a potential Best Picture winner is a strong sign of support for her performance. And what was interesting is that I went back and I tried to look at the years in which we had kind of debates between the actress categories of who's going to win. And almost always they go with the actress in the movie that they liked more. It's fascinating. You just go kind of one over one. And you go Emma Stone or Lily Gladstone. Well, they liked Poor Things over Killers of the Flower Moon, so they went with Emma Stone. Same thing with Cate Blanchett wins for Tar at BAFTA, and Michelle Yeoh wins at SAG for Everything Everywhere All at Once. They went with Michelle Yeoh because they liked Everything Everywhere. You could even go to Frances McDormand in Nomadland versus Viola Davis in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Go with the movie they liked the most. Glenn Close versus Olivia Colman from The Wife and The Favorite. They went with the movie they liked the most. Well, let's break it down in that same scenario. Even if Demi Moore wins at SAG and Mikey Madison wins at BAFTA, who are they going to pick? Well, Nora and The Substance have similar amount of nominations, yes, but I think it's undisputable at this point that Nora is the more well-liked movie. So I'm going to try to maybe, if Mikey Madison wins at SAG, then it's going to be absolutely over, and I think she's going to win at the Oscars. But I think what's likely going to happen is Demi Moore wins at SAG, maybe gives another excellent speech in the same way Lily Gladstone gave a great speech, in the same way she gave a great speech at the Golden Globes. And we're going to have a debate of, is it going to be her time? Is it going to be more of a legacy award? Is it more of a narrative award? Or are they going to give the award to Mikey Madison and Nora? And it's so weird to think about things this way, but I really do think a lot of these picks come down to how you see the night going. So if you see the night going for a Nora winning Best Picture and a Nora winning for Best Screenplay, then I think you also have to go for directing. And then I think you also have to go for editing. And then I think you may also have to go for Best Actress as well. And then there's a totally reasonable scenario as well, I think, where The Substance wins for screenplay and Brady Corbet wins for director and Demi Moore wins for The Substance. And it's weird to say, I think, in such a unpredictable race. This year has been so unpredictable that Nora is going to walk away with maybe 5 Oscars and be kind of like an Oscars sweep. But that is kind of the scenarios that I see happening. I think it would be odd if Nora wins for screenplay and then doesn't win for Mikey Madison, but then does win for picture. I kind of see it as a kind of a big Oscar sweep or nothing at all. It's kind of go big or go home. That's the way I kind of see things right now, although Demi Moore still absolutely has a chance. It's kind of a 50-50 race right now. She has the narrative Demi Moore has. She's in a well-liked movie. She's never won before. All it takes is one amazing SAG speech, and next thing you know, everyone wants to vote for her again. But I may try to go away from the narratives. I've been more and more away from narratives in recent years. In the same way, I may not predict people to spread the wealth and give this person this and this person that, and everyone walks away with an Oscar. I may kind of go more so into what movie did they like the best? let's give it a bunch of awards, just like the last 2 years, when Everything Everywhere All at Once swept a bunch of awards, as did Oppenheimer. And then the Best Picture category, ending things off as a category that is too close to call. Conclave winning here is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because, there have been past winners of Best Film at BAFTA that have gone on to win the Oscars. But what is so crazy to think about is, in the last 10 years, the BAFTA for Best Film matched up with the Oscars for Best Picture only 2 times. In the last 10 years, 2 times. I mean, even in years when there's is it going to be 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, or Shape of Water, or is it going to be 1917 or Parasite, or which one is it going to be? They almost always pick wrong. I mean, 2 out of the last 10 years, they've gotten things right. They predicted Nomadland correctly, and they predicted Oppenheimer correctly. But even in the Everything Everywhere All at Once year, where it was sweeping in all these categories, it still didn't go with Everything Everywhere All at Once. So BAFTA can be a little bit tricky in terms of how accurate they are for the Best Picture category. And in a way, Conclave winning here is a good sign, but in a way it's also maybe dooming it to lose at the Oscars, because the BAFTA just has a very poor track record of overlapping with the Oscars in terms of the Best Film category. But its path for the Oscars still is clear. It is in a kind of 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri kind of a position, where 3 Billboards won BAFTA Best Film, Golden Globes Best Drama, I believe, and then had a potential screenplay win. Ultimately, it didn't win screenplay, and then it did win picture, but Conclave is in a similar position where I think it, even more so than 3 Billboards, it has a stronger chance of winning for Best Screenplay in the case of the Adapted Screenplay category. So it has almost a guaranteed screenplay win, and it has BAFTA. And then if it wins SAG, it will be the 3 Billboards playbook, where 3 Billboards won SAG and BAFTA, but lost at the Oscars because it lost screenplay. But now you have Conclave, which maybe wins SAG Ensemble and BAFTA, and has a guaranteed, I think, adapted screenplay win. That's a very traditional path to, let's say, at the Oscars, win for editing, screenplay, and picture, just like it did here at the BAFTAs. But right now, I think my gut tells me, because it won Best Film here, it's probably not going to win at the Oscars, just because they're so poor at doing that. Although, if it wins at SAG, I'll give it a real consideration. I think right now, if Wicked wins at SAG, Anora is the front runner. If Conclave wins at SAG, it's a tie between Anora and Conclave. And if A Complete Unknown wins at SAG, or if Anora wins at SAG, then Anora is the front runner. And if A Complete Unknown wins at SAG, or Amelia Perez, then who knows what's going to happen. That will be fun to see. But I think right now, the front runners, number 1, Anora, number 2, Conclave, number 3, The Brutalist. We didn't mention The Brutalist too much, but I do think it losing out here actually really hurts its chances. Even though it won for director, cinematography, actor, this was its chances to really rally back from this past few days when it lost PGA and lost EGA. It just seems that maybe the industry support for The Brutalist as a film isn't there overall, doesn't necessarily have the passionate, massive level of support that you would think, in particular just because this is such a more of a European type of a film, I think, The Brutalist versus Anora. So you can kind of almost excuse off a PGA loss or even a DGA loss, but not winning Best Film here, I think maybe at the BAFTAs hurt its overall chances to win at the Oscars. But that's about it, guys. Long video here, but I wanted to kind of go and do a deep dive on these different categories. Stay tuned to next week. I'm going to be giving my thoughts and analysis on the SAG Awards, and then a couple days afterwards, probably on the Wednesday, maybe the Thursday, I'll give my final predictions for all 23 categories. We are here. We are at the thick of things, so I appreciate you guys tagging along. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.